So welcome, Congressman. The last time we saw you was at a fundraiser here in Milford to help out the youth center.
It's good to see you again, Al.
I know we're limited on time, so let me start off asking you, what is the biggest issue you're dealing with today, if you can name one?
We're going to pass the president's Build Back Better agenda in Congress. There are two bills, the bipartisan infrastructure bill and what's called the reconciliation package. These bills are like peanut butter and jelly. They go together. We're going to pass them both together. They're going to make big, bold investments in our roads and bridges and high-speed internet and clean water and transit, and in lowering costs for working families through early education, through lowering out-of-pocket costs for healthcare by allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices, and by supporting bold action on climate change through clean energy tax credits. These bills are about preparing the United States to outcompete the Chinese Communist Party in the 21st century and about giving working families more purchasing power.
Now, the biggest question always comes up is the goals seem lofty. I don't think anybody can argue, but how do you pay for it?
We are going to raise taxes on corporations and the wealthiest individuals in the United States. Over the last 25 years, we have seen the wealth gap in this country continue to widen. We need a more progressive tax code that rewards work, not wealth.
But how does that work? I mean, when we say the wealthiest, is it still above $400,000?
Yes, it is.
And it won't creep down and get to the rest of us?
The president has pledged that nobody earning less than $400,000 a year is going to pay more in taxes. Unlike the previous president, I take this president at his word, and that is certainly the tax proposals that I have seen coming out of the Ways and Means Committee thus far.
So you think he's on track to keep that promise?
Yes, I do.
Now, the Build Back Better, when we start talking about building roads and bridges, I mean, many decades ago, we had that promise, and most of the money went to not building bridges and roads. How do we make sure it gets there this time?
I'm not sure what you're referring to in terms of many decades ago. What I will say is that this infrastructure bill will be the biggest investment in America's infrastructure since the early 1990s. This is about bridges that people can trust to drive over. This is about paving our roads. This is about improving transit so that we can decongest our highways and give people convenient, affordable, reliable access to job centers. And this is about decarbonizing the transportation sector, because we know that here in Massachusetts, that accounts for the plurality of all carbon emissions. If we're serious about getting to net zero carbon by 2050, we've got to start with transportation. And this bill takes a big, giant step in that direction. It also makes big investments in water infrastructure. And I really want to reinforce this because I think Americans and my constituents are increasingly aware of the challenge of PFAS, of these carcinogenic chemicals that have leached from plastics and flame retardant materials into groundwater, and that pose a real public health hazard. Massachusetts has been a leader on this issue. We've lowered the acceptable parts per trillion from 50 to 20 here in Massachusetts, but that has put the onus on cities and towns to make big capital improvements to their water potability facilities to ensure that they're meeting that requirement. This bill is going to directly give money to the state and to cities and towns like Milford to upgrade their water infrastructure. Everybody deserves clean drinking water.
Now, that seems like one of the critical issues, because when the PFAs first started coming out, it was 8 or 12 of them we worried about. Then they did some research and it got up to, tens of chemicals. But nobody knew how to get rid of them in the water system. Have they made good strides in coming up with ideas of how to clean up our water?
Al, it's a great point. And the answer is we've made some strides, but not enough. We know that there's carbon filtration technology that you can add on to the water treatment facilities. And I'm helping to get some funding for that at water treatment facilities around the district. That does take out the PFAS. As you said, we're adding more and more chemicals to this roster of potential carcinogens. And that's good. We want to know, we want the science to tell us what we should not be consuming. But on the technical front, I don't think there's been enough innovation in really how to capture and sequester the PFAS technology. I'll tell you what, though, Massachusetts is going to be the place where this innovation happens. We've got the smartest people in the world living here in Massachusetts with incredible commitment to new technologies in science, in clean energy, in medical device technology, and yes, in PFAS. So I'm confident that we're going to have the funding and we're going to have the technology to solve this problem so that our kids are not drinking water that could make them sick.
So now we keep hearing about a labor shortage. What are we doing to get people back to work?
There has been a lot of, this is a multi-threaded problem. There is no one single solution. There's no one single source of the problem. And so there's not going to be a silver bullet, but there's a number of things that are happening. I'll point to a couple. One is by expanding childcare and early education as part of the Build Back Better agenda, we're going to provide a critical layer of social infrastructure for the care economy so that moms and dads have confidence that their kids are learning while they're going out to earn. That's a big portion of it. We've got to tackle Delta. A big reason that people are reluctant to go into high contact industries like restaurants and hospitality is a fear of the Delta variant. Vaccinations and sensible precautions help us get to the other side of Delta. We're already seeing the numbers go down. And now we need to keep that momentum up as we go into the winter months where people are indoors more frequently. We can get to the other side of this pandemic and ensure that we really relegate the coronavirus to becoming just the source of a common cold like the other 4 coronaviruses are. But to do that, we need to continue to up vaccinations, and we need to prevent the virus from mutating further by ensuring that people throughout the world have access to the vaccinations as well, because mutations that emerge in Latin America or Africa or India wash up on our shores and could be the spark for the next wave.
Now, when we start talking about progress, are you happy with the progress that Massachusetts has made with vaccinations?
Our Commonwealth, by national standards, is doing a good job, but until I really want to see us get to a place where people can go dining indoors, people can go to a concert, people can drop their kids off to school and their kids don't have to wear a mask. That's where I want us to get to. I want us to get back to a place where the virus is really relegated to a small corner, and it becomes like the seasonal flu, where it's something that you got to take seriously, something you want to vaccinate against, but it is not disrupting the cadence of our daily lives. And we're not there yet. We're just not there yet. The single best approach is to get vaccinated. If you yourself are not vaccinated and you're eligible, I'm telling you here, it's safe, it is free, it is effective, it'll keep you out of the hospital if you get sick with this. It'll make you less likely to transmit it to your loved ones. And if you know somebody who's not vaccinated, please encourage them to get vaccinated. It protects them and it protects the people they care about.
Yeah, I don't understand the hesitancy. You know, at first it was, it's too new, there's not enough testing. And I look at this as the biggest clinical trial I've ever seen in my life. 100 million people participated up till now. Is there any real reason not to get vaccinated? Except obviously the healthcare ones that I'm allergic to it or something.
Yeah, I mean, there's a limited subset of medical exemptions that doctors can consult with their patients about. But this vaccine is a triumph of science. It is safe, it works, and the side effects are minuscule and are certainly outweighed both in terms of frequency and in terms of severity by what happens if you get COVID and get hospitalized. So again, I would just really encourage folks to get vaccinated. It is the silver bullet. I was saying before, there's no silver bullet for how to get people back to work. That's a multi-threaded problem with multiple solutions. For the pandemic, there kind of is a silver bullet. It's the vaccine.
It seems as close to a silver bullet as we can find.
Right.
Now, switching subjects, inflation. We're hearing that ugly word come up more and more often. Your thoughts?
We're certainly seeing inflation. We're seeing it in the consumer price index. The chair of the Federal Reserve and his colleagues remain relatively confident that this is not a long-term 1970s style trend where you see not just inflation, but higher inflation expectations. And those two things together, inflation and expectations of inflation, can feed into a positive feedback cycle. And that's not a road that we want to go down. That can be very disruptive. There is strong evidence that is not the case right now, that it will be transitory. It may persist for a few more months. And indeed, when you look at the numbers stripped out from food and fuel, which tend to be more volatile, the inflation numbers look better. A big portion of what we can do is to unclog the supply chains throughout the world. Inflation comes from a lot of dollars chasing relatively few goods, right? That's kind of almost definitionally what inflation is. By boosting the supply of goods, by unclogging our supply chains, we can help tamp down inflation. The president has made big strides on that. For example, he just negotiated that the Port of Los Angeles will operate 24/7 and get all those ships that are waiting to dock off the docket. So that's progress. And then the one area that I zero in on, particularly representing this district, is inflation and housing. Inflation and housing to me is the number one thing I look at with inflation numbers, because I know that the cost of housing is really pinching the wallets of my constituents north and south of the Massachusetts Fourth. We have got to build more housing, and we have got to better fund programs like the low-income housing tax credit and the voucher program that help make housing affordable for people who are going to high-cost sites.
And I agree with you, because trying to recruit people into Massachusetts is becoming more and more difficult.
Right. Yeah.
I can pull them from the West Coast. I can pull them from parts of the East Coast. But anywhere in between, the cost of housing is just, I can't pay them enough.
No, it's the single biggest thing that's pinching the wallets of my constituents is the cost of housing. It's not just a kind of an inner suburbs of Boston issue. It's everywhere in the district. Southeastern Massachusetts, 495 suburbs. The cost of housing is going up by double digits. And it's a supply and demand issue. We've got to build more housing, and the Housing Choice Act here in Massachusetts will help do that. The low-income housing tax credit, that's part of the Build Back Better agenda, will help do that. And we've also got to ensure that as we build more housing, we set aside parts of it as affordable, that are deed restricted to be affordable units, because we want our cities and towns to be inclusive. We want to welcome people who otherwise would not be able to afford to live there. That's good for us economically. That's good for us socially. It just makes our communities more vibrant.
You know, I mean, my brother-in-law got offered a position here in Massachusetts, and he lives in Texas. You know, a 3,500 square foot home that he had bought on a couple acres. And he said, well, I understand I'm going to have to pay a little bit more, maybe go from the 300 I paid to 350. And he got up here and he said, what can I get for 350? It wasn't near.
Yeah, you're not going to get 3,500 square feet. Yeah. No, we got work to do in Massachusetts, and some of the, a lot of the pressures on housing come from relatively good things. We've got relatively high quality schools in Massachusetts relative to other states. We've got a good job economy where industries like medical device technology and the life sciences and financial services and law pay well, and so the labor market is pretty healthy, and so the housing prices match that. So for a lot of good reasons, there's a lot of demand to live in Massachusetts. And we saw that with the census numbers. Actually, our population went up, but it just means we need to build. We got to build housing to keep pace.
Now, when you start talking about borders, what's your opinion? Are we winning this battle on the southern border, or are we holding our own, or are we losing ground?
Well, it's not a battle. We're not fighting a war with immigrants. We welcome immigrants in this country. They make us richer culturally and economically. This president inherited a administrative and humanitarian catastrophe at the southern border, born of 4 years of neglect and malice. And he has responded really on three fronts. One is he's gone after the root of the problem with interventions and programs in the triangle countries of Central America to try to stem the tide of unaccompanied minors and refugees by helping them where they live. He is investing in technical and physical infrastructure at the border so that we can have a secure border. And he is working to provide legal certainty to those who are here in the country and deserve to be able to work and to live knowing that they have protected status. So the TPS holders and dreamers, legal immigrants who have been frustrated and delayed and really treated unfairly by the American immigration system deserve a pathway to become citizens and to become productive members of the economy.
But how do we accomplish that? I mean, at the end of the day, your district was full of immigrants at one point or another. Still is at this day. You know, I'm here because somebody gave my grandfather a chance in Massachusetts to be more productive than he was at home in Portugal and to earn a better living for his family.
That's right.
How we got to take that into consideration that we all came from there, unless you're, Native American, and there are not many percentage-wise. How do we get people to rally around this cause?
I mean, I agree with you, and I'm here because someone gave my great-grandparents a chance. They fled the pogroms in Western Russia and came to Chelsea and started a garment business and climbed the ladder and really became an American success story. So we all have stories like that. They're stories that define this country. And as you said, we've got to rally people around that message. I'll say one silver lining from the Trump years, actually, and this might seem counterintuitive, is that Trump actually, broadly speaking, caused there to be an increase in the popularity of immigration because people were so reviled by his xenophobic, racist language about immigration that actually it almost counterintuitively reminded people what we believe in when it comes to immigration. So that's one silver lining, and we should build on that momentum. This president believes in immigration. He is doing his utmost to work on the three initiatives I described: border security, pathway to legal certainty, and working with the Triangle countries to stem the tide. But he needs Congress's help. And Democrats in the House of Representatives have done our job. We have crafted legislation that would solve these problems really statutorily. But so far as the filibuster in the Senate gives people like Ted Cruz near veto power, we're not going to get it done. And so we've got to really get rid of the filibuster so that we can actually govern again in Congress.
But isn't that dangerous? I mean, getting rid of it sounds good now, but if the tide turns and all of a sudden the Republicans take all three branches, wouldn't that hurt the Democratic agenda?
The filibuster is not a constitutional maxim. This did not come from the pen of James Madison. The filibuster was created in the 19th century as an obscure parliamentary maneuver that became weaponized in the Jim Crow era to battle against civil rights. And it's been used repeatedly in the last 150 years to thwart legislation that has the support of broad majorities in this country, but that can't pass the litmus test of a vanishingly small number of senators. The Senate, it's important to underline, the Senate is already an institution that protects minority viewpoints. Because it represents land, not people, it's already skewed towards rural states, which gives, in our current political environment, which gives conservatives outsized power. So even abolishing the filibuster as it stands right now, it is still an institution that has a lot of deference to minority viewpoints. And that's good. I mean, we want deliberation in Congress to be broad and to be deliberative, to include people's opinions that disagree with something. But we don't want to create gridlock. We've got to be able to pass legislation, especially legislation like gun safety, for example, that has the support of 90% of Americans and can't get through the Senate because of the filibuster. That's not democratic. That starts to become dysfunctional. So no, I'm not worried about setting a precedent. If Republicans had the trifecta and won the White House and both chambers of Congress, they would be able to govern. They would have a mandate from the people. And the Senate still has institutions that allow for democratic viewpoints to be heard.
One of the things I hear as a negative about the immigration wave is that we're taking people who are not vaccinated and sprinkling them throughout the U.S. Are we not offering them vaccines when they come over the border?
We are offering them vaccines when they come over the border.
Okay, so it's not what's being portrayed that we're taking 20% of all the immigrants and sprinkling them throughout, and they could be COVID positive.
I haven't seen the news that you're referring to. I think we're a country of 330 million people taking in tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of immigrants. Are there going to be onesies and twosies? Yeah, of course. It's just a statistical certainty. But we are vaccinating people when they come into this country.
Oh, that's good to hear. Last question, because I know I only have 20 minutes. I saw that you had some reservations about the defense bill and that you wanted to squeeze more productivity and better efficiency.
Yep.
Could you give us an idea of what that's about?
Yeah, many of your viewers will know I served in the Marine Corps for 4.5 years, one of the best decisions I ever made. I love the Marine Corps. I've also worked in bureaucracies from local government, in big business, now at the federal government level. I've never met a bureaucracy that can't do 10% more with 10% less. And the Pentagon is the world's biggest bureaucracy with a budget approaching $1 trillion and 33 levels of hierarchy within that building. I think asking them to do 10% more with 10% less is a very, very simple and achievable ask for the world's biggest bureaucracy, especially when those 10% of those funds could be used for things like climate resilience, global public health, and other challenges that really are going to define the geoeconomic and national security environment on the world stage for the next century.
Well, I don't think anybody can question where your heart is when you were a major in the Marines and served quite, honorably. So it's always interesting to see somebody stand up and say, we can do some more with what we have or less, not cutting back.
It's about efficiencies. Yeah.
Last question. Any words you want to leave for the people in the fourth?
We're going to pass the president's Build Back Better agenda. It is going to make investments in our transportation and water infrastructure, and it's going to lower costs for families across Massachusetts, lower costs in healthcare, lower costs in education. And finally, it's going to take bold action on climate change. We are really going to take a big swing to try to reduce our carbon footprint as a country. We are going to pass this bill, and it's going to be a defining moment for our recovery from the pandemic, and really, frankly, for our recovery from the Trump years.
Well, we thank you for the time today. It was very good to see you come to Milford and help out the Youth Center and their fundraiser, and we look forward to seeing you back in Milford sometime when we can get more time to talk to you.
Absolutely. Be well, Al. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Jake. Bye-bye now.
Not too long since I've been home, been running all my life.